Back so soon. I knew you would not falter. One more for the show. Come, sit. You have passed the 13 episodes, and you come to our podcast to listen to the game of life and death. Your stake is wagered. I refuse none who come here, yet I say, turn back. The recording begins. One lives and one dies. Let us see what you are made.
It's been a great podcast, guys.
Everyone's tuned off now. I'm almost done with the intro. I am the dealer of the Going Rogue Gaming Podcast, Scott Berger. Here are the members of my court.
I'll chime in. Why not? I bet you'll be grateful for that, anyways, as you might even say to that. This is a will. I don't have any flavor text around that. Just that's it. That's me.
I am Colin, wielder of the mighty hammer.
And I'm
Shunner of
Dahlia.
shields. Sorry.
and I'm Dahlia, and I'm wondering what the other two of us are going to do if only one of us lives and the other one dies. Do we just kind of phase out of existence, doing neither?
No, I think you get turned. Well, no, you don't get turned into a card in this game. I think you just you have to go through a 45-minute gauntlet in endless mode is what happens.
Oh.
But yes, listeners, today we are talking the games Hand of Fate 1 and 2.
And Mono's Hands of Fate. But only by accident.
I was gonna skew people astray for a sec by saying the games that we were playing were released on November 15th, 1966 and directed by Harold P. Warren. But Colin, that actually tricked you at first, didn't it, when we said that we were going to play Hand of Fate, didn't you?
It did. We're all playing from your Steam library, and I found it, and I was like, Hands of Fate, that must be the game we're playing. It's from the 90s, based off the movie, and it's very bad. Don't play it. The game you're looking for is Hand of Fate, singular, and then Hand of Fate 2.
Which is singular, but has a 2 at the end.
Yes.
A singular 2.
Collectively, they are the Hand of Fate games. Can't put an S at the end of them.
Hand of Fate 1 released February 17th, 2015. You can find it on Steam, GOG, PlayStation, I guess PS4, Xbox One, all the usual kind of heavy hitter consoles. Developed by Defiant Development, a game dev studio out of Brisbane, Australia, who worked on a couple other little indie games, but I think they're best known for their Hand of Fate series. I think they wound up recently spinning off and joining another game dev studio to release a new game coming out about superheroes, which seems interesting. Stat sheet, Hand of Fate 1 rolls in at our 74th most popular roguelike in the Steam universe, in the Steam catalog. 10,266 total, 10,268 total reviews. Got to get the number right, obviously. In the 98th percentile, Dahlia, as our special guest of honor for this episode, how would you describe this game if you were given 4 cards that from a hooded mysterious figure that you had to shuffle around and form a single sentence from?
It's probably Temperance, the World, the Fool inverted, and then the last one is the Bicycle, how to play poker instruction card. No, but seriously, it is a game that is it is a roguelike in many ways by name only, but still has all of the bits and bobs of a roguelike. Very few of the systems you would expect are in there, and yet it's got them in different ways. It's really just a fun little turn on all of the tropes in just about every way. And you can punch guys in the face with a hammer.
Yeah, we're pretty loose with the roguelike.
Mm-hmm.
It's just even a little bit roguelike. We're good with that.
Yeah. Yeah, this game is interesting because I wanted to go through my Steam purchase history and figure out what sort of prompted me at the time to seek this game out. Because Hand of Fate 1, like we said, kind of released a while back. But I wound up looking in, like, seeing it in my Steam library somewhere around like 20, or let's see, the first achievement I had was in like 2019. So I'm like, okay, scroll, account details. What other games did I buy around that time to kind of like inform my play style? And I couldn't find it.
I
And
think
now
it
I'm
might have
wondering,
been part of like a humble bundle or something.
it's either that or the game is haunted and just self-inserted itself into my Steam library, which seems equally plausible.
You were just like shaking your computer and a card fell out.
But yeah, Hand of Fate, Hand of Fate 1, I guess maybe we'll focus our discussion on. You are greeted by a hooded, cloaked figure who greets you to your roguelike podcast, and you are presented with a story mode, and I think you have to unlock endless mode after a little bit. Is that right?
Yeah, for both of them.
Yeah. And story mode. This is we've covered some deck building card games in the past. This is very much a card game in that almost basically everything in this game is cards, except for unexpectedly 3D battle sequences.
Yes, it is a card battler where you don't play with the cards.
Right.
That's the first twist on the formula.
The hooded chatty narrator of the game opens up what can I only be described as kind of like a Pokemon style card collecting thing that I have in my basement downstairs, and presents you with a series of challenges that you must go through in order to eventually figure out what the secret behind this game of life and death is. Which I guess, spoiler alert, is fighting the dealer himself at the end. But
Wow, spoilers.
but generally, this game has you go through a series of 3 different encounters, and then you complete those, and you fight some little boss guy, and you get an unlockable bit that will help with your meta progression throughout the game.
Yeah, it's somewhat linear, the cards. For some of them, I'm assuming, especially later in the game, you get a little bit more choice, but you're hunting for the stairs and you work your way down, and then I don't know what happened at the end. I didn't play that far in the first one.
Well, maybe we should back up and describe how the game play space is sort of set up. So you're sitting across a table from the dealer, very tarot card inspired medieval robes, Near Eastern kind of aesthetic. But what's interesting to me about this game is that instead of other kind of roguelike games where you have, your character going from like room to room, the cards are the rooms in this sense.
Yeah, they're like laid out in a pattern generally, and you have to go from wherever you start through the cards to wherever the stairs or the gate or whatever it is in that particular level is. And the cards that you have in your encounters deck are the ones that you can encounter, as well as the bullshit ones that the dealer decided to throw in for the scenario.
Yeah, I did think it was interesting that to finish first to going through. Yeah, you're working your way through the cards. Your little play figurine is going on, and card flips over, and then something happens. It's either you make a choice, and or you take a chance, and the dealer shuffles 4 cards together, and maybe some of them are successes or failures, and that's just kind of a random chance thing. Or you get into an encounter where you Pokemon battle style into the 3D world where you're actually, I got out my controller and used the controller to fight things because it's a over the shoulder mini combat thing against, I don't know, 3 to 6 enemies.
Like a beat 'em up.
Yeah, it's very what is it, like the Batman Arkham game style, punch them and counter them and dodge them and stun them kind of are your 4 buttons.
It's probably worth pointing out that in a typical, I guess, run of this game, you have a level. There's cards laid out that you go from card to card. Your little Monopoly man hops from one to the other. But you gotta juggle resources too along the way. I think in this one, in Hand of Fate 1, every time you move from card to card, you consume one food. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
It's spoiler for Hand of Fate 2. I played more of that to refresh myself for this than I did Hand of Fate 1.
Yeah, and I can see why, because Hand of Fate 2, you don't consume food on things that you've already discovered. Or I think that's true for most of them. Is that right? Anyway, Hand of Fate 1 kind of laying out the formula for what will be perfected in the sequel. But you have health, you have food, and you have gold. Pretty obvious. You use gold to buy stuff, food to eat and regenerate your health. But in some cases, you actually can use food as a currency. Like if you come across a card encounter that's like, the helpful priest. Hello, sir. Can I steal 25 food from you in order for maybe a blessing? ? And you're like, well,
won't you feed the children?
Yeah. Yeah. The guilt trip of I guess the children will starve again this winter. Be like, look, I have 3 food. I'm going to starve to death. I just need to get to the exit. I'm trying.
Yeah, the children will starve if the anarchist fire thrower burns down all the field too. So
so maybe you should think about that.
Me, the earner, the job creator of this civilization.
I was waiting for job creator to come out. It was on my bingo card.
But yeah, like we kind of mentioned, there's encounter decks, there's equipment decks, there's lots of deck systems in this game, and lots of cards have what look like little stamps on them, or little tokens, where we kind of mentioned the helpful priest, but you come across some encounters that are like, little story beat, text. Would you like to save the princess or help? What's one of them? It's like there's 2 lovers that are like fleeing from their strict father or something. You got to help them, and then you're presented with like, well, how much do you want to help them? A little bit or a lot? It's like, well, a lot's going to cost you, but that will help your odds with the, I think in Hand of Fate 1, the only kind of chance mechanic that you have is the card shuffling. Is that right?
Yeah,
I remember that being the case. Yeah, because I remember when I first did a dice. Spoiler for Hand of Fate 2. There's dice in it. I was like, what the fuck is this?
It was a dice and a metronome thing that they introduced in the second one to give it more variety, because otherwise it is just watching the same card shuffle animation over and over and over again. But I tell you what, I'm not sure. I think I prefer FTL. I think like it's the same game structure around like, here's a scenario. We're not going to actually present you with the odds because we're assholes and we don't actually want you to know what's going to happen. And then you make a decision, and then it's like, okay, and now here you get to see the odds. So there's kind of like an intermediate step where it's like, oh, now I know I have a 1 in 4 chance of having success, and then like a 1 in 4 chance of like really bad failure, and the rest are failure or something like that. So like, is that better or worse than just saying like chance of success X amount? I don't know. I like, as I've complained, I want to know what my probability of success is before choosing the option. I think that's just a modern gameplay good decision. But
I agree. By the way, a pro tip for that card shuffling game: look for the card that you want the most, and just see if that is the one that winds up going on to the top. Now you only have to pick between 3 cards. That's a real Monty Hall problem solution for the real world.
Half of this game, half of
Wait,
Hand
so
of
it's
Fate 1,
actually physically shuffling them around?
it is, yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep. There's one that will wind up on top.
My choosing strategy was always the one that it just puts you on. So always left, because it doesn't matter.
No,
following it with my eyes.
It was all my voodoo strategy was always pick the worst one, because that way, that's
yeah. You watch the worst one, and if that one's the one that goes on top, you know exactly which one not to pick. I did the exact same thing. And some of the ones where there's like a great success one, I'd watch that one and really risk it for the biscuit. But yeah, it's literally the Monty Hall problem.
I literally did not know that you could. That I assumed that it was 100% random and there was no information to be gained.
Actually, I had no idea.
Yeah, there have been when I got this game ages ago, I think I must have spent way too much time focusing on like those card shuffling things, like you know, you're putting a ball under the solo cups and you're like listening for it to like roll around. You're like, okay, it's definitely under that one. Like the cards, and like you can kind of discern this too from like the card shuffling speed. So like there's some encounters that are like borderline impossible, and your hope of completing it is basically zero, and the cards will shuffle like instantaneously fast, and for all intents and purposes, like, yeah, that one's random. But for like the really easy ones, like right at the start, like, welcome to Hand of Fate, here's your hand of cards, now decide your fate. The cards will like very slowly shuffle, and if you watch one, you can kind of like, ones on the edge will have like a higher speed to them, and like as they shuffle back out, like they maintain that kind of momentum, so you can sort of watch like, okay, the one on the end is like shuffling like into the pile very fast, and then when it reshuffles, you can kind of figure out like where it went from.
I was probably trying like clicking X as fast as I can, hoping that I could skip the shuffle.
Yep, me too.
I mean, that's my biggest complaint with both of these games, is there is a lot of it. You shuffle a lot of times, and it takes, I mean, it's not that long, a couple of seconds, 5 seconds, but I'm like, I do not care.
Yeah.
As fast, like just, and like, there's a lot of flavor text too that's just barely like, maybe this is important, probably not. But yeah, there's a lot of like, or like the intro to the battle is very slow. It's a little bit better in the second one, but the first one, there's a lot of like, it's
Gotta
cool the
zoom
first
in on
time.
all the goblins and see them do their move.
Yeah. Like, I guess I haven't explored. Maybe there's a setting to be like, turn off all of that. I don't want
there's
any
not.
transition animations.
No, I'm sorry, there's not.
Yeah. I mean, it's a small complaint, but it is annoying.
I think it's a valid one though, because yeah, it's not that much time in the grand scheme of things, but also that time it adds nothing to it. So why have it?
Yeah, they're like, you're going into the card and there's like a swirling portal thing. It's like, yeah, I guess if we were in 1999 and you were using that time to load the scenario,
Yeah,
sure. Like, if it has a purpose, but I'm pretty sure like what Hand of Fate 2 came out in what
17, I think.
2017, November 7th, 2017. Yes.
Yeah, we pretty much got rid of loading animations by that time.
Which,
like, you could load it in the background while you're like clicking on other stuff.
Right. Yeah, it almost seems like this game needs or like one or both of these games needs hey, it's 2023 as of this recording, and we all have NVMe SSDs on our motherboard, so just have the dealer go click and then jump right into combat, and then click, you're jumped out. But yeah, I think like despite there's a lot of things with Hand of Fate 1 that kind of haven't really aged super well from a gameplay perspective, but I kind of still had a lot of fun jumping back into this. I was like, okay, like let's pick up where I left off, and I think I had just beaten like the Lizard King at that point. I'm like, okay, well I'll play through this grouping of scenarios just to get my bearings, remember what the hell was going on. And yeah, like I was picking up the muscle memory. I'm like, okay, like this is like the deck that I had been building at the time. And like this is roughly where I was with like some of these like meta progression tokens and things like that. I'm like, okay, like I'm all starting to get back into this. Lost to the Lizard King like 2 or 3 times. I'm like, okay, let's maybe turn it down to easy mode and see what happens.
So had all 3 of you played Hand of Fate 2?
This was my first time jumping into Hand of Fate 2, actually.
Okay, so you had only played Hand of Fate 1.
Yes.
Dahlia, you had played both of them, I'm assuming. And then Will, you had only played 2?
Yeah, 30 hours.
Okay. So I was the only one that came in completely obviously blind, because I played the wrong game before I played the right game. So I didn't play that much of Hand of Fate 1 because I was planning on playing more of Hand of Fate 2, and I heard Will say it's not as good. So I played having played like an hour of Hand of Fate 1 and then directly into Hand of Fate 2, it feels like Hand of Fate 1 is one of the most directly like, this is the first game in a series, and then they greatly expanded and bettered it for the second game. Like, it is not a sequel in the like, we're just picking up where the story left off. It is, the first game was a demo of the idea, and the second game was the full execution of the promise that was foretold in Hand of Fate 1. The dealer had a secret card behind his back, and it was, if we make enough money off this first game, we'll make the good game for real this time. I didn't get far enough into Hand of Fate 1 to judge it really on its own merit. I thought it was like a fine game that, even in the hour of playing, was like, okay, I'm having fun, but this is starting to be similar, and I could see it getting a little bit samey over the time, which is, I mean, exactly what they tried to solve in the second one. So,
yep. Yeah, let's maybe jump into Hand of Fate 2 a little bit. So the stat sheet for that one, we said released almost 2 years later, November 7th, 2017, same devs. Ironically, Hand of Fate 2, Hand of Fate 1 was number 74. Hand of Fate number 2 is number 132 on the popularity list on Steam, with only 5,295 reviews, cranking in at only the 96.79 percentile. But yeah, like I was kind of surprised to see that the objectively better game seemingly less popular, but I don't know if that's like part of that bit of like just like review bias over time, like, ooh, the shiny new thing when it's first released like gets all the reviews, and then like the sequel comes out, and then, you know, the review universe is kind of diluted out to some degree, and people are like, oh yeah, I remember Hand of Fate, that was a good game, maybe I'll review it. I don't know, forget.
yeah. Or it could just be like the people who would have liked Hand of Fate 2 but didn't like Hand of Fate 1 is like, well, I'm not going to try that. So anyone who was on the fence but chose not to, you know, it's self-weeded out the people who would probably have liked the second game more.
Yeah. I think I will. There's one thing about Hand of Fate 1 that this might be a spicy take.
Oh, I can't wait.
I think the soundtrack in Hand of Fate 1 is better than Hand of Fate 2.
You would notice that.
I'm gonna be real with you, Scott. There's two things I do when I turn on a game. They are go to the settings and turn off motion blur, and then they are turn the music all the way down. I am not here. I'm not here to listen to video game music.
Finally someone who lives the Will life. Scott
Boy.
Scott and I talking about like, oh, that was a good soundtrack. Like, oh, I don't know about it. And Will's just like, I didn't.
No, I'm sorry. I played a lot of DDR in high school. All of the music from video games that I've ever needed to listen to got crammed into that 4 years or so. So now I can listen to real music or whatever terrible like procedural cop show I'm watching on the other monitor while I'm playing. That's gonna engage me way more than the music. I'm with Will on this one.
I mean, well, part of it is that like every podcast episode I try to end with like some sort of like cool music clip from the game to be like, oh, this is what the thing was. So I was like going through, and the music artist for this game, Jeff Van Dyke, DYCK is how you pronounce it. Can't go one episode without me mispronouncing at least one thing. But he did the soundtrack to Rome Total War, Definite Stay Tuned, Paint the Town Red, another kind of like if Minecraft was developed by murderous sociopaths, Android Assault Cactus, kind of a fun game, and weirdly Tiger Woods PGA Tour 2004, and like all of these just like absolutely slap.
Classic soundtrack.
I actually think that I might remember that music from the PGA Tour games is weirdly good. So
yeah. But I was going through and I was like listening to his YouTube playlists, and I'm like, okay, yeah, Hand of Fate 1, yeah, this is all the stuff that I remember from like, you know, the almost 20 hours that I put into the first game. Like, yeah, this and like there's a lot of stuff from the game that kind of like you don't get to hear like the full music piece, almost kind of to the detriment. So if anyone is, you know, the two video game music geeks listening to this, 100% go check out Jeff Van Dyke's YouTube channel and boot up that Hand of Fate 1 playlist, and definitely not the Hand of Fate 2 playlist.
Wait, is Hand of Fate 2 music bad?
No, it's not bad. But when I was going through, I was thumbs upping the ones. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll thumbs up this one to save for later, come back to for podcast editing. Ooh, that one's another good one. Thumbs up. Ooh, this one's really good too. Thumbs up. Come to the Hand of Fate 2 playlist. And I'm just like, yeah, I mean, it's good, but
I'll tell you that I was playing Hand of Fate 2 like an hour ago, and I cannot summon into my brain the music. So I have no memory of music playing. So it obviously wasn't like good enough to have done the earworm thing.
Yeah.
Which happens on worse games and worse music, but it's like, I'm sure it's like good and appropriate, but it's not catchy. So it doesn't drive itself into your brain so you hear it again and again later.
It's not the Doom Eternal soundtrack, is what you're saying.
There are no heavy metal guitars in it, as far as I can remember.
Can we get to the core of the matter here? I think what's on everyone's minds.
What stringed instrument was playing in the Hand of Fate 1 soundtrack? Yes, I think we definitely should get to that.
What's the best
no.
card?
I think it's a mandolin? Question mark?
What's your question, Will?
The question is, this game, it seems to be the answer to the question, how much bullshit can you put around a very simple combat experience? And the difference between 1 and 2 is dramatic in the sense that, like, the answer, if you just have cards slipping over and like flavor text and like this thing is happening, what will you do? 1 in 4 chance of winning. This thing is happening. Like, that gets boring immediately. The second time they're like, okay, fine, we're gonna introduce dice. We're gonna introduce ways of modifying the dice. We're gonna introduce a metronome thing, so it's a timing sort of like thing. We're gonna introduce a wheel that spins around, and so
blessings, curses, relics.
Right. You got fame now too. So
ways to like pull things out of your deck.
Right, and this all is like a just padding around, like essentially making sure that you win in those combat scenarios. And I think that's all well and good, but I think it's interesting because it's like it's like the on the extreme side of like taking a normal game. Like if you think of like I say normal as if like this is a norm, but like think about a Zelda sort of game, like a Breath of the Wild, like it's a very continuous experience. It's like almost the extreme of continuity where you are running from place to place and like things are happening. But this game is like, nope, you are in a scenario, and then it's just the text of what's happening outside that scenario. So you're not going into the next town to talk to the person to save the chicken to do what. It's just like, yep, that's just text. And so it's just a very interesting way of breaking it up. And in my opinion, it seems lazy, but it's novel. It's a novel, but it is lazy. It is the anime of video games. That's my hot take here.
Well, are we talking One Punch Man anime, or are we talking?
I'm saying there's one
Dragon
frame
Ball GT anime,
and the screen is like panning over the one frame while they concentrate at each other for 30 seconds. You know, talking in their heads about how they were going to destroy their enemy. That's what it feels like a little bit.
It is interesting though, because like it's a good point of fundamentally the absolute core of the game is the warp your way into a small battle arena, you against a couple of other things, people, monsters, etc.
Garden gnomes.
And turns out if you add enough stuff around it, that it stops being like a difference in it starts being a difference in kind. Like it feels like the same mechanics but a different game, because you have so many ways to modify it and so many other things that you're like doing and interacting with. You're changing weapons because they deal different kinds of damage to different, like, oh, swords deal with Northmen better, so you like got to switch to that for this thing. Like I feel like it does become a different experience.
I feel like that statement applies more to Hand of Fate 1 than it does to Hand of Fate 2, I think, because like, yeah, Hand of Fate 1 is just like a very rudimentary Batman Arkham combat game with like some like interesting deck builder stuff kind of around it, but maybe a little disjointed. Hand of Fate 2, I think, yeah, there's more stuff, but there's some like indescribable like quintessential element that like makes it greater than the sum of its parts. And maybe that's just me like trying to dig out of this like 20-hour hole that I put into the first game, but like it feels like there's no other like deck building game that feels like this, kind of, with like these kind of approaches, or even like the process by which you go through and like meta progress. So you're like, oh man, I'm getting really stuck on this one quest in Hand of Fate 2. If only I was able to get some better equipment. Well, like I have some of these encounters that have like these tokens that I haven't unlocked yet. Maybe I should go and try to like pick some more gnomes. Maybe that'll unlock the thing. And then you unlock the thing like, oh, like I got a cool sword out of that. Maybe I can use that to advance a little bit. Or like you'll get like either equipment or like more encounter types, and you can tune your, you can like customize your deck to put in the like a bullshit like heal style deck. Like, okay, this thing is like totally overloaded with stuff to heal me or give me food, so that way I won't be like totally kicked to the curb with the BS meter the next time I play through. I don't know how much the recommended decks involve like the bullshit-orama, but it does seem like you can deck build your way out of that to some degree.
So when you guys were playing, how many times did you go back and replay old? So like in the second one, there's a bunch of distinct like mini campaign. So there's the larger
scenarios,
campaign, and then there's the scenario. So it's like, okay, you go through this scenario and do a thing. I didn't really go. I didn't play for long enough to go back and redo very many of them. But I'm assuming that if you're playing at either harder difficulties or just longer into the game, you end up going back and redoing some of those just to do the tokens on cards and just like grind your way through stuff. And there's definitely some scenarios that are ideal for proccing the things you need to unlock the tokens and do all of that. There's a couple that just really make that a lot easier depending on what they do. If we're comparing it to something like FTL, it'd be like, I don't care about winning on this run. This is the run to just like unlock the crystal golem ship or whatever.
Yes.
Or the air sucking ones. So you're just like, okay, I don't care about any of this. I just want to make sure that I get a gazillion fame so I can unlock the super ice weapon or whatever.
Exactly. Okay. And for me, that was the game. Like I think all I have left in Hand of Fate 2 is the last and the second to last scenario. And I did all of those basically with just the starting hammer. And the rest of the time was me going back and unlocking literally every little piece of garbage that I could, because that's the game for me, is filling out that codex. It's it's collecting them all. It's the Pokemon analogy.
You got to catch all those tokens and all the cards. Got to help the little boy find his family. Got to help the guy get good at thieving. You got to both save and damn the town.
There is something stupidly addicting about the encounter card comes up and the little token peels off and is floating in the dealer's hand. And he's like, are you going to solve it? Are you going to solve it?
Are you going to do it? You got it? Did you
can pull that mega fail card out of the 4 options. And I'm just like sitting there watching this like jeweled piece of candy dance around in front of my face. I'm like, okay, I'm going to give the begging children all of my gold again this time, or I'm going to give the gnome this other weapon because I got to get that stupid token. And then, the gnome, this weapon's too big for the gnome. What am I going to do with this? And then the dealer takes the token back. I'm like, no.
The flip side of that token is when you find the card that's like the vampire guy who's just like sucking your blood, and it's just like, do you give him a little more blood? You want to give him a little more blood? You want to give him a little more blood? And I kept like, let him keep sucking your blood, because I thought eventually like a cool event would proc. It doesn't. He just drains all of your health. And then if you do it just one single time, you get the same event. And the first time I had a temporary blessing that like full healed me when I got down to 25 health, and I drained over 100% of my life, my max life, crying. I was like, I gotta get it. I've already invested too much now. There's got to be like something where you give him enough blood. He's like, now I am sated. Here's your very special blood dagger. But no, he never gives you the blood dagger.
He never does.
I don't remember if in Hand of Fate 2, I don't know that I've gotten far enough to encounter this yet. I'm sure it's in here. Hand of Fate 1, a pretty common encounter that you encounter with is a trapped dungeon, a trap labyrinth. Are those in the second one? It doesn't seem like they are as frequent in at least like the few hours that I've played of the first few campaign levels.
I think there's like one card with a trap dungeon encounter in it that you can get. Like that's all I remember is that there's one of them.
Yeah.
The one thing I really did appreciate from the second one as compared to the first. So the first is it's a pretty straightforward, maybe there's a couple different ways you could go to get to the like stairs at the end of the level, but there's like 6 cards and you do whatever to get there. Versus the second one starts really that like the scenarios use the cards in different and interesting way. So I just played through the one where rather than go through this thing and find the stairs, it's like here's like 40 cards just laid out on the table. Go chase down the relics that are like hopping around, and it's the same game, but they use the cards in such a different way that it's like a very different feel, and you kind of know it gives you a lot of things where it reveals stuff. So you're like you have to plan out like, oh, I need to go to this one first so that I can get the fame so I can go to the other one, and it's got a lot of different little mini games in it that help keep it fresh as you're going through. I like that.
Yeah, I think we touch on companions in Hand of Fate 2 yet?
No.
Only obliquely.
And how like extremely irritating the one guy who keeps getting captured is, and you have to make sure that he doesn't get his ass beat when he's handing over all of his gold to thieves in the market. Yeah, I think like among many of the improvements that Hand of Fate 2 does over 1, graphically looks much better. I think Hand of Fate 1 I don't think looked bad per se, but I think it's just everything is just better polished in Hand of Fate 2. But we kind of touched on this with the food, like for each kind of card that you walk on, you can camp, I think, in most scenarios where, because if you're retrotting old cards that you've passed on, you're not consuming that food, it at least gives you the option of saying, okay, do you want to like camp on this card here and like trade with someone or like eat a food and regenerate your health. I appreciated that a lot with some campaign things I was going through. I'm like, oh, I'm kind of dying here, but I need to camp in order to refill my health a little bit. But there's, I think, like almost every campaign, again, like the few that I've played in the early game so far in Hand of Fate 2, seems to give you like a different kind of campaign or a companion option, which do very interesting stuff. One thing that really frustrated me about Hand of Fate 1 was like if you were fighting like a big mob of dudes and it's like you versus like literally 40 skeleton archers, kind of annoying. But if you have a big burly Northman guy who can just like fury charge through them and stun like half of them, that I think that's a smart idea.
No, I am that guy. I'm wielding the big hammer and I'm swinging because I'm not good at shields. I'm just rolling and swinging hammers at things. I felt like I was very bad at the parry mechanic. It doesn't feel like it should be hard, but I just couldn't do it. I just dodged instead.
I don't remember if this was me flipping to easy mode in Hand of Fate 1, but it feels like the combat in Hand of Fate 2 is much harder, like in terms of timing, where we've kind of said it was like a Batman game, but for those who haven't played, it's like, you basically just like button mash, but every so often like an enemy that's about to attack you will have a prompt above their head for like green, hit the Y button and you can counter them, and you block and then you riposte and attack them, or they're going to do something and you can like shield bash them to interrupt, or various things like that. But it felt like the timings for those were much tighter in Hand of Fate 2 than in 1. It felt like it was a much bigger window where I was almost getting bored in the first one of like, okay, yep, counter,
Yeah, you could just
attack,
basically
counter.
hit it whenever you feel like it. Like, yeah, I guess we'll counter him.
Mhm.
Hand of Fate 2, you actually have to do it at the right time, or they'll just hit you.
It's almost like a rhythm game.
Yeah, actually, yeah. My rhythm was dodging and not countering, but it did feel like okay, trying to roll away and get like pick at the one at the edges so you're not surrounded by all the guys and you're not being hit by things you can't see. Because that's really how they get you, is the like 5 thieves with fast knives stabbing you in the back. That's what got me.
I don't remember. I mean, I know I beat the game, Hand of Fate 2, but like I went back and I only played a few of the actual combats. And so yeah, I mean the combat itself, it kind of felt like what you're talking about, much faster. I really did notice that big difference in the parry time too. And like I don't know what the complexity looks like anymore though. I can't recall.
What's the compelling case for doing the endless mode? Because for me, I feel like Hand of Fate 1, the endless mode was helpful for like, I'm getting stuck on like the main kind of story thing. And yeah, I kind of don't want to like fight the same lizard man over and over and over again. Just throw it all in there in one big bucket and see what happens. Has anyone else experimented with endless mode to a deep degree?
I haven't even touched
No.
it at all. I don't even know what it does. Can you unlock things in the campaign mode from the endless mode?
I believe so, because I think the endless mode was the first time in Hand of Fate 1 and I actually encountered like some of these training cards where I'm like, how have I never seen these before? But I guess like because of like the deck tuning thing that I've been going through, it's like, well, I'm not going to put these things in here because they're just like, welcome to the game tutorial things.
Oh yeah.
But in endless mode, like unless you've unlocked it, or like it's like everything is in there, and
Yeah.
it's a good way, I think, to meta progress in a way where you're just like, yeah, I have 20 minutes before my bus comes up to the stop. I'll just jump in and see what happens, and no expectations. I'll just let the game wash over me. And there's some that can be a good way to like get some unlocks that you either forgot existed or like revisit stuff that was interesting. Like, you boot up endless mode and like the next card that you encounter is like a Kraken boss fight. And you're like, oh shit, like I forgot this thing was in here. This is kind of a dope encounter. Maybe takes a little too long, but this was kind of fun. And then, oh, my bus is here, quit the game. I'm imagining it's probably similar for Hand of Fate 2, but it seemed like there were cards that were specific to endless mode in Hand of Fate 2 that I was unlocking.
Yeah, there definitely are. I unlocked some of them. It's like, now the goblins are making trouble in endless mode. So I'm assuming it's something that you never encounter them in the base game. You have to go to endless mode. Maybe you get special unlocks from doing that. But
there's more ranged weapons in Hand of Fate 2, right? Am I crazy?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Because there's at least like 4 different ones.
Yeah. I seem to recall one of the early campaign things, like you get some hand grenades. I'm like, okay, now we're talking. Hand of Fate 1, I don't recall ever getting like any sort of ranged stuff ever. And having to deal with like armored lizard men that are like acid spitballing you from across the map, kind of bullshit from time to time. But that first time that you get some sort of like blessed anti-skeleton grenade,
the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch.
Yes, that's the one. And you just bowling ball down 8 skeletons at once, and you complete the encounter in like a quarter of a second. Pretty good.
Highly recommend.
Well, yeah, I think Hand of Fate 2, I've only gotten through 1, 2, 3, maybe like 4 or 5 of the campaign scenarios, but there's like 20 plus of them. I think like all things, Hand of Fate 2 has, really kind of delivered with more like better and more polished. And you can kick gnomes, which is a thumbs up in my book.
No, I didn't like the gnome kicking.
No.
I found it to be annoying.
I mean, yes,
I was funny. It was funny the first time, but the second time I'm like, ah, God, get off of me. They just jump on you and stab you. And then you have to kick them.
Mhm.
And then,
You have to kick them.
And then you try and give them stuff and you don't have the right things, and then they'll give you the good stuff. And I wasn't able to get the token. That's the real, there we go. That's it. That's why I'm angry. It's because I didn't get the token from them because I didn't have the right thing to give them.
Just got to grind those gnomes and get that little candy token.
Yeah. Literally grind them into gnome paste.
Do we want to move on to rankings next?
I feel like I had one. What else? Oh, I thought the art was fairly good for the cards. I liked the way that they had the art on the cards, but I will say that I was not particularly a huge fan of the style look of the actual like combat game. It felt very like Fable-esque, which I mean it's a little bit of a nitpick in terms of it was no detriment, and I'm glad it was like I'd rather play a stylized game from 2017 than a game from 2017 that's trying and failing to look good. But it's a little more cartoony than I would prefer. But
you've got the cards, which are the abstraction of reality, and then
Yeah.
that reality is the juxtaposition with that to give it. I mean, like otherwise, it's like you're playing a cartoon and another abstraction of reality. So I don't know. Maybe I see what you're talking about though, and I agree.
I didn't like the way my dude looked.
I mean, I decided to vote on the latest game that we're choosing on the basis of I don't want to play as these really cartoony characters. I just don't like that style.
Well, also
Right.
like Hand of Fate 1, like you can't customize your character. You are like a mohawky
Yeah.
like I mean like you're kind of stylized to some degree, but like there's no real creative user agency of like, oh, I want my hero to have like a big white beard and like ridiculous proportions or something like that. You're just like your standard kind of mohawked begrizzled adventurer. But at least Hand of Fate 2, I think you have those sort of player customization options. And you're right that like I like the aesthetic and like the art direction of like the environments, but you're right that like so there's something about the character models that seems incongruous with like the tarot like mysterious element of like the card design and
or just with the
artwork.
dealer himself. The dealer is so detailed and
Yeah, the
realistic.
dealer's
and
super
if you
detailed.
guys were standing next to each other, he'd be like, "What the hell is that for you?"
Yeah, the dealer's realistic. The cards are like tarot type stylized. Like it's definitely like artistic, and it's like pretty like simple colors. And then I mean, it's not quite like League of Legends style, but it's that
it's moving there though. It's going from Borderlands to League of Legends, and it's somewhere in the middle.
Right, exactly. So it's a style. I'm always hesitant to criticize things being stylized as opposed to just being super realistic, because I think that's the way that video games are moving now in 2023, and I think it's a good choice. Like bad realistic stuff. Like the problem with realism is that the closer you get to realism, the easier it is to notice where it's not real. Like, oh, this game looks so great, except for the water's terrible. It's like this water would have literally blown my mind in 2010. Like I wouldn't have believed it was possible.
Or just like fashion going out of style, like something that was like set in the modern age in like 2004, and you're like, oh my god, that was like people were wearing shirts like that back then. Jesus.
Right, it's just like the Matrix coat, but he's supposed to like actually be wearing it for real.
This will never go out of style, Trinity.
Let me ask one final another question, I should say. Did you guys like the narrator, and like did you feel differently about the narrator between 1 and 2?
I kind of like the narrator in this game, in both of these games.
I was constantly surprised by the narrator like chiming in to say like meaningful nonsense based on what was happening. I like the amount of times they said something. I was like, They programmed that in here, him to be that
Yeah.
specific about this specific situation.
I liked the narrator. I feel like I'm not hugely into flavor text, and I feel like he had a good voice, and I feel like that was just enough to make it so like the flavor text was not boring.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I'm willing to listen to you say this because it's short. It's just long enough that I'm not trying to skip through it. And I can't skip through it because it's too short to skip through. But yeah, I mean, I liked him.
I mean, I tend to agree more with 2 than 1, but it's just from having played 1 here for the first time for this review, where like I don't know how many times he told me like after I selected to like get some food when I needed it or something, like just like or whatever I got, and he's just like, oh, I bet you're grateful for the gat, aren't you? And I'm just like, I cannot, I don't tell me I'm grateful. I'm fucking not grateful. Fucking take the food back. I don't need this food. I just got this food because it was presented to me. Just like
Oh, now you seem
I've got 30
ungrateful.
food in my bag. I'm overflowing with food here.
Right. And in the second one, when I for the time I played it, he really pipes down quite a bit. Like the amount of like they finally realized, I think, that okay, there's a level that he's above the annoying level right now. He's got to be like talk less, and when he does talk, make it more relevant to what's happening. And so
I think that's the big difference.
So that's what happened. Yeah,
it's not like the Warcraft 2 style. Like every time you click to make him move, he says the same thing.
Right.
Your food is under attack.
Yeah. You require additional food, pylons, etc. But yeah, like he actually said like things relevant to the cards almost exclusively. And also, I guess just in 2, there's less just, oh, here's a card that gives you food. It's almost always something that just happens to give you a boon at the end.
Yeah. I guess in Will's defense a little bit, like there are times where I'm trying to read the thing and I can't like multi-process between like reading and having the narrator be like, oh, well, that's an interesting option, huh? Would you look at the text right there? Oh, if you could read it without me talking, that'd be really great, wouldn't it? And like the times where I was playing on the bus, I'm just like, muted, no headphones or anything. And I'm just like, okay, I can sit here, I can read the text at my own leisure. I'm aware of the dealer in the background. He's jostling around making some kind of quip. But I can see it in both ways. I can see like the snarkiness of the narrator being like a fun bit of spice, but I think it's a little overspiced in Hand of Fate 1, and I think they just got the oregano right for the sequel.
So, if they were making Hand of Fate 3, the other hand, what would you change? What would you add? What do you think that last spice, the MSG to take it over the top?
Continue the trend, maybe. Oh, go ahead.
I think like there's an unexplored aspect to like the Batman style combat that I think that like if they lean into that maybe a little more, because like right now it's like it's a little jarring that like the card stuff is like it's either card or Batman. And if that's either like more seamlessly integrated, or like if you're in like a Batman Arkham City style game and you're running around and like, oh, like I can only get into this building here if I do this dumb card thing, or like there's obviously people way smarter than me than this that can crack this code. But if either like the combat is more like combo driven, so you have that kind of like, oh, net like instead of just equipment, you have cards that can like build out combos or things like that.
Yeah.
Interesting idea to explore there. But I think like I don't know, like there's a lot of text stuff that could be done.
You could do something like if you like there's the ones where like do a pickpocket thing. It's like you could just have it be like you're going in and now you're like your little dude, your cartoon man is going in and you have to like click the QuickTime event at the right moments to do the pickpocketing thing.
One thing that I was actually kind of surprised that wasn't in 2 was going into a market store and like your options are like, okay, I can only like buy stuff. I can buy equipment or I can buy food. Give me the option to be like the chaotic archetype of like stealing food and losing fame or like trading off those resources. Yeah. And like, yeah, I think they hit a lot of stuff right with Hand of Fate 2. It's I think a testament that I'm struggling to think of what they could improve on.
Dahlia, as our resident Hand of Fate lover, anything that you would?
I think adding like I think in order to keep that secret blend of herbs and spices right, you gotta improve both sides of it. I agree that the combat is a little shallow, and I don't know how you widen that out without like expanding it so big that it's no longer that sort of like I like the
Yeah.
fact that you get dropped into like 5 square foot of
Yeah.
room and you just beat the absolute crap out of some skeletons for a minute and then you're done. But at the same time, expanding what you can do in that feels like
Yeah.
a natural next step. But
I
also,
feel like no matter what, it has to be small, the thing that you're dropped into.
yeah,
So it's
it
a
can't
bite.
be that
It's a
big.
bite. It's a delicious
Mhm.
little bite.
You're talking about, again, to bring it back to Zelda. Oh, now you're racing horses. Oh, here's one scenario. Now you're finding skeleton like spiders or whatever the hell they are, and then now you're doing these other things. But they're not all combat. They're all very distinct sort of things in this continuous landscape of things to do.
Well, then have we just recreated Mario Party?
Ooh, no, I've cracked it. I finally cracked it.
Mario.
Yeah,
Party.
we
Pat
should.
pending.
Okay,
This
Patent
idea of
pending.
discrete.
we need to add
like,
Mario.
segments.
That's what we need.
Oh, we need a Mario in it.
Italian plumbers is the thing. Is this
Hand of
the
Fate,
missing oregano?
Kart Racer. Actually, in my factoid section here, did you know there's a Hand of Fate board game?
No. Oh wait,
Uh,
wait. Maybe I saw that on Tabletop
Is it a
Simulator.
board game or is it a card game? Because I feel like it should be a card game.
Let's scroll
I
through
mean,
the
it's
Kickstarter here.
maybe it's both.
It is.
Yeah,
It is a tabletop game with little minifigs. That on Kickstarter, I think. Where was I seeing? They had pledged 30,000 to develop this. And they got Australian dollars $490,000 to fund this thing. And shockingly, not too poorly rated on Board Game Geek, which I'm like, but yeah, like if here's what I cracked. They put that Kickstarter game
Mhm.
as like a Pokemon trading card open world thing in Zelda Breath of the Wild. Boom, we figured it out. Make it happen.
Well, I don't like Breath of the Wild though. I wasn't actually thinking that's a good game.
That's you being wrong.
I mean, it's meant for children, really. It's a puzzle game for children, right?
The people love Breath of the Wild.
Hand of Fate 2 is a puzzle game for adults.
Sorry, Dahlia, I feel like I cut you off though before. You were saying something about both sides of the.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can guess what the other half is. They do the same bullshit they did in between 1 and 2, between 2 and 3 for the cards. They make it so that there's the little chance mini games. They add 1 or 2 more of those. They make new scenarios that make use of a 4th resource. They just iterate slightly on it because that part I feel like is solid. If you're in it for just the fighting, you're going to be disappointed. If you're in it for doing that thing we all love, which is getting that little piece of candy from the dealer by doing weird things to unlock it, they keep that, they're golden.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'm going to
rankings
find
time.
what is the ERRC grid? I think is it the applicable? What is that? We got reduce, raise, create, and eliminate. And so if you apply this sort of methodology to like an already novel idea, you can basically create new novelty out of it. And in this case, what would you eliminate? What would you reduce, raise, create? I guess that's a whole other discussion. We're already the ratings. Never mind. But this is the framework that game creators should be thinking about in general. It's like
we'll get
pretty good.
GPT-4 on it, and that'll solve all of our problems.
Yeah,
us.
there we go. That's what it needs. It needs GPT-4 to just create new cards for you on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
And then have it be the voice of the narrator just be auto-generated.
As an AI language model, I am unable to provide context for this fate selection. But as an AI language model, we also have to jump into the rankings because we have an email to get to.
Oh,
Yes.
Uh-oh.
Let's. I think I'll go first. Unsurprisingly, I think Hand of Fate 1, while fun to come back to, I think just pales in comparison in basically every regard to Hand of Fate 2. I was actually like kind of surprised at how well polished 2 was over 1. But I think like the only reason to kind of revisit Hand of Fate 1 would be like if you have it in your backlog, you maybe have played it once before and you're like, yeah, I don't know, should I go back to it? I would say, yeah, go back to it. If you didn't have Hand of Fate 2 in your library. If you have number 2 in your library and you're suffering the same fate, definitely go back and play 2. I think it's pretty dope. Ranking wise, I'm gonna put Hand of Fate 1 just above Dungeons of Dreadmore and just behind Invisible Ink, and kind of like my solid middle meaty pack of the curve. All good games, but I think, you know, the sequel just leaps and bounds better. Hand of Fate 2 I'm putting just behind Binding of Isaac Rebirth and just ahead of Warsim, The Realm of Islona. It's fun. Play it.
I'll go next. I have very similar feelings, very similar rankings to Scott. The same rankings as Scott, but just shifted both games slightly one higher. So Hand of Fate's my number 4 out of 19 games. And yeah, I think that it was like I said bite-sized before. It's like tapas. It's like a little tapas of a game. Mm-hmm. Each you go through each little card and you get a little taste of combat for each little thing. Like, it's not like eating a hearty steak. It's a bunch of little delightful bites, and then you go on to like have the waiter tell you a story about the man whose family was taken from him or something. But yeah, I liked Hand of Fate 2 better than Hand of Fate 1. I think it's the logical and creative conclusion to what they put in Hand of Fate 1. And if you play one of them, only play Hand of Fate 2.
I'll jump in last. That way, Dahlia, that way you get the final words on this. So I think, I'm just going to follow more of the trend, to be honest. I know it's weird for us to agree, mostly agree. I think from Scott to Colin to myself, it's shifting up in the upward direction, where I thought, or my opinion from, what was it, 2019 or whatever, when I played Hand of Fate 2 was at a 7.5. And so that's what I gave it then. That's what I'm going to say I would, well, I'm not going to rate it again, because obviously coming back to the game, I would rate it lower because the novelty's gone. But Hand of Fate 1, I gave a 5.5. Again, Hand of Fate 2 was a 7.5, which means that on the rankings list, Hand of Fate, it's actually, I love to say this, it was better than Risk of Rain. It was better than Cogmind, especially.
Hey, this is all good company. These are all
so it's got an 8, but at a 5.5, that's below the recommend threshold of 6. So I can't recommend it. Hand of Fate 2, rank 3, so it's just falling behind.
And I'm looking at our average ranking. Hand of Fate 2 is now the number 2 game, because all of our other highly ranked games have at least one of us which deeply disliked it. And so the fact that we all pretty much liked Hand of Fate 2, it's the number 2 game now behind FTL.
Wait, what's our overall one?
It's FTL.
I mean, that's great.
Dahlia is our special guest, and the whopping 2 games that you've been on the podcast with us thus far. Many more to come in the future, I'm sure. Which one, I wonder, tops out at your number 1?
I'm going to say that Hand of Fate 1 is the worst game I have ever reviewed for this podcast, and Hand of Fate 2 is at least twice as good as 1, making it my number 1 pick of reviewed games for this podcast. Yes.
Wow, stunning.
If you have Hand of Fate 1 in your library and you don't have Hand of Fate 2, please send me an email, and maybe I will buy it for you, because I think it's $8. Just play Hand of Fate 2.
It's not. It's like $5 right now. It's on sale.
Yeah, it's really good. And it literally in every single instance is replaced by Hand of Fate 2. The only context you're missing is that at the end of Hand of Fate 1, you, the player, beat up the dealer guy and take his place, and that's the entire point of what's happening in Hand of Fate 2, is he's training you to beat up your previous character. There's
like Pokemon Gold Silver in that sense.
Spoilers. You can be Professor Oak.
We have an email this week, which I'm going to dump into the chat here for people to read. But I will read through this email that we've gotten from our good friend Davian. Davian. Look, okay, it's spelled Fuxa. I got the pronunciation guide from
Right.
him.
That's the only
Davian,
reason I
I'm gonna
remember this
say
person.
Davian Fuxa. Okay. Because maybe Davian Fuchs, you know?
I do feel like you should dump that pronunciation guide in there at some point.
Yeah, like the what's the Wikipedia linguistic thing? Anyway,
IPA.
yes. Davian says, greetings again, Scott, Will, and Colin, and in this case, Dahlia. Congratulations on continuing with your podcast and exploring various games with rogue something attached to them. I do have a question in regards whether your podcast will exclusively cover various games on Steam, or if you will eventually branch out and to delve into other topics related to the rogue genre. For example, it has been about half a month since the annual competition for the 7-day Roguelike challenge concluded. Entrants to this year's jam are still under review, but it likely won't be long before the judging process is complete. About 30% of the reviews still need to be done, and this has proceeded at lightning speed over the past couple years. Full disclosure, I know this because I'm one of the reviewers this year, and I'm directly interacting with Darren Gray, who organizes the latter workings of getting games judged. Another obvious topic is interviews with various developers of noteworthy games within the genre. This is something that we don't typically see anymore and would likely be a good resource for people looking to learn about the inner workings of the games we play. Hoping to see this podcast continue on for a long time into the future. Davian F.
Davian F.
Yeah, Davian F, the group officer for the Steam Roguelike group, and from Davian Plays on YouTube. Thanks for writing into the show, Davian. It's always good to see emails rolling in. I think the first question about covering games exclusive to Steam, the reason why I picked up the data set for Steam games to start with is just it's the biggest one. Unsurprisingly, I think I've said we have like something of like 6,000 games to pick from that particular catalog, and I've tried desperately to yank that data out of itch.io, but it is not nearly as conveniently packaged. But there are some non-Steam games on our list that are for sure stay tuned if/when we get to them, including but not limited to the original 1980 Rogue, which is technically on Steam, but if the Allen Computer Museum was still open, I had plans for us to take a field trip down there to play the original Rogue on an Apple II or a PDP-11 computer.
I would be down. That'd be fun.
There's and comparing it with the non-Steam, I think it's open source ? Release version Rogue, which I think would be a comparison. There's a lot of roguelike mobile games out there, which I think are like pretty well done and worthy of inclusion in the conversation, like Shattered Pixel Dungeon. There's Pathos NetHack, Hoplite are ones that come to mind. Magic Survival, the one that inspired Vampire Survivors. A super stay tuned for Dahlia to come back to talk about Ilona. Dahlia, have you heard of Ilona the roguelike before?
It sounds familiar, but my mind screen is blank.
I think you would really like that game. It's super JRPG. There's lots of interesting stuff about it. But there's also like a handful of Super Nintendo and Genesis roguelikes, like the original Toe Jam and Earl, maybe ? So there's definitely a lot of stuff that we can cover outside of Steam. It's just Steam is just the biggest data set that we have at the moment. 7-day roguelikes, has anyone else heard of 7-day roguelikes before?
I mean, I haven't heard of 7-day roguelike specifically, but like the game jam style thing is something I've absolutely heard of. So I'm assuming it's just the same concept as applied to like specifically roguelikes. And I think honestly, a roguelike is a much more achievable goal to create in 7 days. Like you could create an okay roguelike in 7 days. You can't create like an okay Skyrim. So like roguelikes are built on the idea of having a little bit more limited of a scope from the technical side and being more focused on either some novelty thing or just using your imagination for a good chunks of it. So
and I think because of our once every 2 week release cadence, unless like we're absolutely dying to cover some like 7-day roguelike game jam game, I think it's probably better for us to wait until it's like come out of incubation a little bit and matured a little. There's and you know like Cogmind, there's some on our list that have evolved out of the 7-day roguelike game jam, like Golden Crone Hotel is a really fun one. I don't remember if Rift Wizard was a 7-day roguelike, but things like that are definitely on our list for sure.
Yeah. If we did it, we'd probably do the whole challenge as one episode of like, we played a bunch of these games for like 10 minutes and this is the one that we liked the most out of 10 minutes. So and probably we wouldn't be able to give, I mean, it looks like there's 9, or there were 9 in the original. I don't know. There's a number of them.
Yeah. I
don't think we would really be able to give all of them the time that they deserve. So we would have to give them equally not enough time.
It's hard enough to get Will to not tear his eyeballs out while playing Cogmind. So it might be a tall order for some of these even more extreme indie level games, which like, you know, I mean, we have a YouTube channel. There's no reason why we couldn't just do like, hey, let's check these out. But I don't know if those would make podcast episodes specifically. And then lastly, like with related to interviews with developers, I feel like there's a lot of overlap between those kinds of ideas with the original, the Big Daddy roguelike podcast, Roguelike Radio, which they do interviews with developers. They do like, you know, covering of 7-day roguelike jams. All great stuff. Go check that out. There's another good podcast that does like very much more dev centric interview stuff called Eggplant, The Secret Life of Games, that I've been listening to lately. Very well produced program. Don't download their show, download ours. Cannibalization of audience, etc. But I found out about their show through ChatGPT somehow, because I had no idea that was a thing that existed until I'm like
an interesting story I wish you'd tell.
I was like, hey, ChatGPT, what are the best roguelike podcasts? Fish, compliment. And it was like, well, you should go check out Roguelike Radio, unsurprisingly. You should go check out this Spelunky podcast. I'm like, Spelunky podcast? Oh, like it seems like I think they had pivoted away from a podcast entirely about Spelunky 1 and 2 to other stuff, and all the better for that. But I think like similarly coming back to having people on the show to talk about games that they like and us like holding back from bashing on it. If we had someone who would like spent 15 years developing this game and Will's just like
you point me out as if that's probably what would happen. That's almost exactly what would happen. Yeah, they'd have to have thick skin.
Yeah, I think the problem is that we're not actually we're all frauds, and we don't we probably don't love roguelike games enough.
No.
Like I think they're fun and interesting, but they're not like my number one passion. And I'm very much enjoy. Yes, exactly. Fashion is my number one passion. No, but like roguelike games are fun and interesting to play because they're small enough that you can kind of actually go through them and not destroy yourself trying to do one every other week.
I did have
I would be worried to have someone on there and be like, oh no, I don't like your game. Oh.
I did have a card in the back of pocket of something involving roguelike developers, but not talking about the game that they developed. Because then that gives us at least some option of being like, man, that game was a real stinker, huh? And then being like, oh yeah, it was, huh? So at least it gives us that door to open.
I feel like if we had someone on our podcast, we couldn't play their game. We would just have to have them be like, or I mean, there are games out there that I'm like, I don't really like this game, but I'm fascinated by like the way that it was developed, or I want it to succeed so much. So like something like as Warsim, I didn't like Warsim, but I would be fascinated to talk to the person who made it, because
I would be best friends with the creator of Warsim.
Yeah, and like I would probably have more fun making Warsim than I did playing it. Because then you're starting to be like, that's a different kind of game. The puzzle is the game making itself.
Right.
But-
Yeah, I think between like the podcast audio only medium that we put out once every 2 weeks, a YouTube platform that I don't know, maybe we'll do something with ? And every podcast has to have a Patreon, right? Maybe we could jam something into that. So I think all these things are definite stay tunes depending on podcast host availability and schedules and interest in these kinds of things. I think like we're all somewhat interested in these things, but just trying to figure out when and where to put them is the question. But yeah.
Right. And also like how many people are actually listening? I know of you and at least one other person.
Hey man, we almost have 100 YouTube views, so you know.
Yeah.
Well, for posterity reasons, you know, when people are looking back on this podcast 10,000 years from now as the thing that really kickstarted the second renaissance, they're going to be like, wow, they only had triple-digit viewership at that point before the Joe Rogan podcast bottomed out, and then it became the #1 in the world. It's incredible.
Joe Roguelike.
Joe Roguelike. I love how much I hate that.
Yeah, I wouldn't listen to that. Did we decide what we're doing for next week?
Well, before that, as we wind down here, Dahlia, thank you for being on the podcast this week.
Pleasure
One
to
of many future shows for sure. Do you have anything that you want to plug or promote or use as a grandstand for the podcast for the next 35 seconds?
No, not really.
Okay. Excellent.
What's your favorite game that's not this one?
I spent literally all of Sunday playing my time at Sandrock. It's pretty good, but it's still in early access, so I don't know that I recommend it to anybody.
All right, well, there's a game that exists.
There's a game that exists, and if you're thinking about buying it, someone else already did.
Well, there you go. Can't have a more ringing endorsement than that.
Excellent. Social media plugs, grogpodzone@gmail.com if you want to send us in an email to read on the show. I've been trying to respond back to YouTube comments, but hard to do that. But if you want something guaranteed to read on the show, send it there. Mastodon, grogpod at gamedev.place, and all of our rankings, previous episodes, all that good stuff can be found on our website at grogpod.zone. Our next episode, I think we had the ability to card shuffle between our dealer chosen grouping of Streets of Rogue, Gunfire Reborn, and Loop Hero. And I think we've kind of whittled it down to maybe Streets of Rogue at this point. Is that right? Or do we have to have a coin flip off again?
Loop Hero looked interesting. It might be more fun. I know I've played like probably 20 minutes of Streets of Rogue, so like I know it'll be at least okay.
Mm-hmm.
Loop Hero looks fun, but don't know. I would be down for a coin flip, but I'll let you guys weigh in on what you want to do here.
I mean, without trying to put too much thumb host pressure on the scale, Streets of Rogue, you can do a 4-player local split screen of all ape characters. So I'm just going to throw that.
Okay, that's I own Loop Hero. It's pretty good. We should probably play it someday, but I'm ready for some Rogue Streets. I want to be an ape ooking and punching things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Next episode, pencil it in for we're hitting the streets of Rogue. We're gonna put on some ape suits for that, I think. All right. We'll see you next time with that very
clever outro.
Yes, the outro segment is here, and now it is no more.